It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung
by immigrants as they struck out to the shores, pioneers who pushed westward against the unforgiving wilderness. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
It was the call of workers to organize, women who reached for the ballots, a president who chose the moon as our new frontier,
and a king who took us to the mountaintop and pointed the way to the promised land.
Yes, we can to justice and equality.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
From WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network, the title of our episode, The Unions. The unions are under constant attack. If anyone has been looking at various news reports from the Janus decision, the Supreme Court on a 5-4 vote. And as an exclamation point, the resignation of Justice Kennedy, a retirement actually. He'll be retiring at the end of July. And of course another conservative will be appointed by DJ Trump. You have to evaluate, Justice Kennedy was a swing vote on some cases, but basically he told the conservative line. Will there be another swing vote? Not in the immediate future. Looking at the Supreme Court, you look at it basically in terms of presidents. DJ Trump has 2 more years after this year in his term. Will he get another 4 years? Well, that would be a question for history to answer. And so effectively we get 6 years and then there'll be a different president, no doubt. So that's very difficult to say when you talk about a decade there. What we do know is that the justices on the Supreme Court in their 80s sometimes stick around, sometimes don't. There could be one more retirement. The notorious Ruth Bader Ginsburg could retire sometime in the near future, particularly if DJ Trump were reelected. Now, some of the pundits were thinking that Hillary the Monster Clinton would appoint 2. That was wishful thinking. She's not appointing anything. Perhaps a better scenario will be the monster in the future could end up on the Supreme Court. That's not out of the question itself. One of the things to always remember, you follow these various trends. This is a right-wing trend. DJ Trump was in Fargo, North Dakota, telling the people there to vote for the reactionary Republican, his name right now. But Heidi Shierholz herself is a moderate at best, but she is a member of the state of North Dakota. How much enthusiasm DJ Trump is able to, as they say, kick up like the proverbial dust in the hot summer sun on the plains of North Dakota is difficult to say, but it is a tight, challenging race, no doubt about that. Hadn't looked at any polling lately, and also you say in Indiana, the sheriff down there, Donnelly, that's a hard sell. In West Virginia, that's Senator Meacham there. Senator Meacham, of course, has been the governor there, fairly popular. That is more of a stretch for the Republicans. And could there be other upsets? Yes, there could be. And could there be, say, a Democrat being elected in a state like Arizona? Yes, that could happen. But in the interim, the trade unions, since their incursion in the American labor struggle from the 30s on, have adjusted, and now they're back basically to where they were in the 30s. The right wingers are running willy-nilly across the continental U.S., particularly in these so-called right to work. Many people call them right to starve states. Michigan, no one could believe that. The home of the UAW, one of the more active trade unions in the history of the U.S., is now a right-to-work state. That was brought in under Gateway Snyder. Well, Gateway is leaving, but where will the legislature in Michigan go? You have a lot of voter suppression in Michigan. Same thing has happened in Ohio. Ohio is a little different case. Going back to Rhodes, Ohio has been a Republican state. Cadre is running there against DeWine. The last poll I seen, it was about 4 points for DeWine. And at the Consumer Protection Agency, evidently the new head of it, they're going to appoint another head, Mulvaney, I think is how you pronounce his name, from South Carolina, has cut the fine of one of these payday loan organizations in half. That is what you get in this type of political environment. We always assumed that DJ Trump would be bad news. But coupled with the Republican agenda, this is the same agenda they've been running the last 20 years, and now you see it out there as anti-union, anti-working, anti-women, anti-GBLT, etc. You name it, is anti here, anti there, fueled by crackpots. But what is happening here, the undermining the trade unions, we'll be looking at it from several points. We're appreciative of the Public News Service, and then we'll go to the Los Angeles Times. We'll start out in Florida, a right-to-work state under boss Scott, who is running there for the Senate, hoping to upset Senator Nelson. And these are some of the ebbs and flows that you have. The Democratic Party, unfortunately, ran a very weak candidate in Hillary DeMonster Clinton. The Clintons suffered various other things, political malpractice by her general staff, all led to the election being a very, very close election. Of course, the monopoly media helped out also. And the whole thing with the FBI, Comey, etc. there, that plays out, but that is not as important as other things that happened in that particular race. And it is now, as they say, water under the proverbial bridge. We now, as progressives, have to fight where we are. You'll see a picture of Sandra Fluke standing on a table with the sign union. I thought it was very appropriate that we have it here. But we'll move to the Public News Service now, and where we're reporting from Tallahassee in Florida. Opponents of this is Wednesday's ruling, freeing government workers from having to pay into unions, are using Florida as an example of how bad it could be for working families across the country. The 5-4 decision there upends a 41-year-old ruling that allows states to require public workers to pay some fees to unions that represent them, even if the worker chose not to join the union. The decision doesn't impact the Sunshine State because of a right-to-work law that makes paying collective bargaining fees voluntary. In the Sunshine State, Mike Williams, president of Florida AFL-CIO, said the state already was tripling working families with low wages, and now the rest of the country will feel the same. It continues our nation-long race to the bottom for worker rights. It increases economic inequality and makes it even more difficult for American workers to make ends meet. No doubt about that. Studies have brought that up. When we normally, the old supply and demand models, we talked about that on Numbers Man, that's our macroeconomics program, of how that's basically out of the window because workers have less bargaining power. And now there will be even less. Limited power of public unions has been long a goal of conservatives. That 6 states have passed right-to-work laws since 2012. Florida's government has more than 1,000 positions represented 81,000 represented by unions, but fewer than 10% of the workers are paying dues. So that's roughly about, $8,000 and change. I've got to tell you, in a right-to-work state like Florida, we've lived this decision pretty much every day in a system that undermines the freedom to have a voice on the job and to be paid less access to health care. And this is what happens. At one time, we had various private sectors, IBM, an example, to keep unions out. They matched union benefits. But eventually they decided to move from their defined pension plan to 401k. So the workers were basically robbed of the type of financial security that they got from the defined pension plan. Also, healthcare benefits, other things were cut along the way. And most of these workers, right-wing workers, don't comprehend if they work for, say, municipal workers, etc., and they are making, quote-unquote, a good pay at this point in time. They will eventually start to lose those pay increases, and at the same time, work conditions will be totally different than they are now, and job security also. So this is a very big issue, but we'll see trade unions reach out more to the general population to obtain funding. And that is another situation, a red herring, coming. If you've noticed, mailboxes, our mailbox has been full of things from the DNC, which we blocked most of them, and Tom Perez and various clowns of that nature. But there are progressive movements out there, Our Revolution, Bernie Sanders, and various other people that are running around the country as progressives that you can donate money to or work on their behalf to get out the vote, or just simply to propagandize behind progressive issues as we're doing here. Is very, very important, because the right has the money, and now they have the legislative pull. The reason they are moving to pass to put this right-wing nominee in place to confirm the right-winger. I don't know if they chose it. They talked about some right-winger named Kavanaugh, and I was looking over to predicted.com. Not a very good prediction there. That's one of these where you can buy shares and predict what will happen, will not happen. They had been jealous very, very low and had the other candidates much higher in terms of their percentages. So we probably don't want to look at them as much. Let's go now to, this again is a public news service. And where do we need to go? We had something from Georgia here. I'm not sure. This is out of Chicago, dealing a serious financial blow. This is on the 28th to Democrat-leaning labor organizations, Supreme Court. We all know that. The case originated from Illinois, and a guy named Mark Janus, who argued that everything unions do, including collective bargaining with the state, is political, and employees should not be forced to pay for it. The executive director of the independent political group United Working Families said that the ruling was not a surprise. No doubt about that. The real question is whether the Democrats will fight back. She stressed the middle of protection for workers, protection for women, protection for immigrants, people of color, being stripped away by the high court. Democrats have been chasing their tail in a debate over civility. Now, we did a program on civility, and yes, civility is an issue that is basically out the window. Prioritizing is what has to happen now. A recent study by Manzo of the Illinois Economic Policy Institute, and Robert Breno of the University of Illinois at Champaign estimate the public sector unions could lose more than 700,000 members over time as a result of the ruling. We'll look at that study and bring it up to you. This Supreme Court decision that was specifically designed by people who have taken in the profits from a rigged economy to weaken collective bargaining efforts. The court's conservative majority, re-empowered by this Neil Gorsuch, his mother was no good, upended a 41-year-old decision that allows states to require public workers to pay some fees, whether they belong to a union or not, period. So this is a sort of a roundup here coming in from various states, what they're going to do. We did Florida. We'll do Indiana here, and then we'll move on to the LATimes. This is out of Indianapolis. Decision widely viewed, as a potentially crippling blow to unions representing government workers. They'd like to go beyond that. In 2005, when Indiana got rid of public sector collective bargaining, we had the 24 highest hourly wages in the nation. This is from Mr. Bradley here, the Hoosier State. But as of 2017, we were down to 29th. They were 39th, Bradley noted that women and people of color could be disproportionately affected by the Janus case, as these populations tend to make up a majority of public sector workers in some places not. The court's decision overturned the 1977 ruling. That is a ruling roughly 50 years ago. Heidi Shierholz, former chief economist at the U.S. Department of Labor, said she said it's already legal for fair share fees to be used for political activity. She said giving workers a choice about paying the share of costs associated with negotiating high wages and benefits and filing workplace grievances is likely to produce what she called a free ride effect. Well, it will produce a free ride effect, but it'll get to the point the trade unions literally will not afford to do it. Shierholz has said even if they value it highly, they may be unwilling to pay the dues. Can't afford to pay the dues. With the lessening of union resources, it will favor the ability of unions to provide critical services, no doubt about that. Shierholz said, I hope I'm pronouncing her name right, said she believed Wynn's decision is a result of a 40-year effort, and no doubt about this. This was not something dreamed up by DJ Trump himself. So again, to the Public News Service, we are much grateful here. These trade unions are starting to fight back, and they will obviously continue to fight back. They have no other alternative. On to California, and this is by Howard Bloom. Anyway, leaders of school workers unions in California and nationwide know the effects after the Wednesday decision to strike down mandatory union fees. They have to fight harder, no doubt about that. The battle over school workers will intensify in California, where these unions fueled by union dues have long been a political force. The strength has helped the state to remain a bastion of liberalism and labor-friendly policies. Declining enrollment and growth of mostly non-union charter schools. Very important there when you talk about these charter schools, they are non-union inroads in the membership of local unions. The United Teachers of Los Angeles Teacher membership in LA United has dropped from 42,000 to 31,000 since 2007, roughly 11 years. New anti-union forces funded by conservative and corporate interests have plans of aggressive campaigns to reduce union clout and to deliver the mortal blow, as they call it. So what's at stake here? Union fees that can run around $1,000. The fees the court nixed by the 5-4 in Janus versus Acme typically make up 2/3 of that total. States have been allowed to authorize public sector unions to cover the cost of their work on contracts grievances by collecting a fair share fees from those who they represent, even people who don't belong to the union. The real targets of this lawsuits are core membership. That's Lily Exxon Garcia said, the president of the National Education Association, the nation's largest teachers union. Anti-labor groups are going after our members with drop campaigns. She said, and they're going to say, why don't you drop your membership and get away free? Well, yeah, a lot of people have done that. This is Bruce Allister, an American government teacher, in Carlsbad High School. I think you're going to see a number of teachers say, I'm out of here, I'm going to collect my 1,000 back, and I'm going to put the omen on the union to win those folks back. Ash is a self-described social fiscal conservative who declined to join the union. He was a plaintiff in Janus versus CTA, another federal lawsuit there, and also was on hold with Janus. Anyway, I really appreciate our union will remain a member no matter what. That is a person that teaches journalism at Santa Monica College, pays about $700 a year to belong to it. Assaults. She estimates that 90% of the faculty feel as she does. Well, they're enjoying the benefits of it. And in 2011, when the unions got lost agency fees in Wisconsin, membership and resources plummeted. But unlike California, Eric Hines, president of the California Teachers Association, the union base here is stronger and the political landscape is different. Of course, Wisconsin, under the leadership of Boss Walker. In anticipation of Janus, the Democrat-controlled legislature approved various measures that could help unions retain members. Union influence has long shaped work rules in California, collective bargaining, grievance procedures, layoff procedures, etc. In Wisconsin, teachers can only bargain over salary, and in some states they can't even do that. We saw that in very red states like Oklahoma, where our former late broadcast partner Jerry Pippin worked out of. The teachers did win some concessions by literally going on strike. The same thing happened in West Virginia. Pro-business groups, social conservatives, and Democrats with less labor-friendly views. The latter group is likely to include supporters of charter schools. Now, this is one of the situations. President Obama's Secretary of Education, a fellow out of Chicago, can't remember his name now, he doesn't need Duncan, was into these charter schools. And this is what can happen when progressive forces like President Obama, Barack Obama, is bamboozled into thinking these charter schools are a way of innovation. Yes, a charter school can innovate, but the bulk of the charter schools, 95% of them, are not innovators. They're nothing more than bloodsuckers to suck up the public dollar and come out with poor-performing education, period. In LA, with every financial with the financial strength of mandatory dues, the local teacher union was far outspent by charter supporters in the recent school board election. Last year, charter-backed candidates won the first board majority. Now, you understand what this is all about, because primarily these bloodsuckers prey on communities of color, saying, look, we can offer you schools where your students are better off. In fact, I was talking to a parent. His kids were in public schools, and he said, well, they went to private. Now, I don't think this was a charter school, but nonetheless, now his daughter is or has her PhD. That can be a number of variables there by simply just moving the child out of the neighborhood into a different environment. And I believe that's probably what happened there. But that's one of the ticklish things at how it's presented to people. I can recall when I was growing up, we had parochial schools at that point in time, no charter schools. And some people went to parochial schools and were in better times, or in better case academically because they did the fundamentals. But at the same time, they also lost out on the socialization process for the most part, and the rigid rules depending on what type of parochial school it was. In fact, I remember one semester teaching in a parochial school. I won't name it here, but they changed the bishops, and I was ousted. I was teaching government, incidentally. But that is one of the things. The teachers, the 1968, the students there were very interested in what was going on. Probably some of their parents not so much so, but that was a long time ago. Whereas today, a totally different ball game, a different set on the chessboard. So when you get into these so-called charter schools, majority of them are designed to do precisely what these pro-business types that put their money into them want to achieve. A quote-unquote business-friendly agenda that is completely sanitized, void of any intellectual integrity, period. And they teach very little history, that sort of thing there. They don't teach critical thinking. They do teach some math. It's probably watered down, and some other skills, such as writing skills, etc. So they can say that people do better on their standardized tests. Sometimes, actually, they do not do better on their standardized tests. It depends how their selection process is. If it is a charter school that can pick the people that come in, the results, you can understand, are already set up. Some guy named Dorsey, a first-grade teacher and union leader in Fremont, said her local has learned that if anything is needed to ramp up political activity. There's no doubt about that. Trade unions at one time divorced themselves from the larger world and said, look, we're trade unions. We can take care of ourselves. That has fallen completely out there. Even the AFL-CIO understands that. The steel workers went into these concession contracts. Now their leadership, their membership is down to the point that they're no longer doing that. And union after union, in the federal government, trade unions, DJ Trump kicked them out of government buildings, changing work rules, working on perhaps changing federal pension plans, and making it easier to terminate a federal worker. So those are some of the things that happens here. And, of course, by using cultural conservatism, etc., they're able to sell this to people. The unions also work to communicate better internally, she said, and that is it. You can no longer have trade unions fighting for the deduct box, so to speak, as Mr. in Louisiana used to say. We have to find out what engages and excites the teachers. For some, it's social justice. For others, it's curriculum and developing professionally. And let me finish this article up here, longer than I thought it was. Anti-union organizations have developed sophisticated campaigns to urge members to leave. Groups active in California include the Freedom Foundation, which has an address in Fullerton, and the California Policy Center based in Orange County. You can bet on that one. The organizations have compiled databases of union members through public records and plans to reach them through a door knock. In other words, go to their houses, intimidate them, their radio advertisement, phone banking, billboards, and digital advertising on Facebook and such things. This is Howard Blooming. Anyway, this is from the LATimes, the story out of California, period. See what else is about the epic battle here shaping up after Justice Kennedy has left. That's going to be a very, very difficult battle because the Republicans can do basically what they want to do. Out of East Pittsburgh, the officer there was charged with homicide by the district attorney. In Charlottesville, this criminal here that killed a heavy hire is now facing federal hate crime charges finally. So some of the things. We try to go out west to get a different view, so we went to Los Angeles this time around. Let me just check our time here, how it goes along. We're doing all right. We'll get to doing the sports. We'll take a quick look at the Washington Post. This has been basically public media, the public media report. Oh boy. They hope Republicans to confirm a candidate before midterms because they know also there's a meeting set up in Helsinki, Finland, between DJ Trump on the 16th of July and V.I. Putin. And let's see what else. Rosenstein and Vary, I suppose how you pronounce his name, to field questions lawmakers on the Clinton operation. A waste of time. And a fact checker here, well, in steel industry. It was in Money Magazine, an article there from a roll steel company out of Baytown, Texas, that because of the tariffs they would be paying more for their product, and they now roughly have about 300 workers. And at one time, the economic crises, they were down to 100. What they want is actually just a waiver for 2 years so they can build a new plant. And once they build a new plant, they feel they will be in the ballpark. We had a lot of things going on at the World Cup. Sweden down Mexico 3-0. I just do it while I'm here. Germany is out of the race against South Korea, and most people like myself would assume that they would have made the win. Anyway, we'll be here on Friday Jobber, and we'll have more information on this. I'm not sure. I hadn't looked at our friends from the University of Virginia, what they have to say about some of the elections. Of course, our own Ben Jealous winning his primary in Maryland, and Ms. Cortez in New York upsetting Crawley, I believe is his name. Let's go do the sports here somewhere. To the College World Series, it gets now tied 1-1. Oregon State in what is proverbially called a walk-off home run was able to survive 1-1. So a big picture here in Oregon State. Player Travis limping, it looks like here. Oh no, his name is LATimes. Anyway, his 2-0 pitch there. So game 2, Travis LATimes was able to launch that. And let's look at the schedule here. We go down. This is a whole schedule, literally. Well, this may be too much schedule. But anyway, Arkansas and Oregon State are notched up now 1-1 in the College World Series in Omaha, Nebraska. So we'll continue to cover this. I believe they also play tomorrow. And to the FIFA World Cup, this was on Wednesday. Mexico and Sweden. Sweden 3-0 there. And South Korea and Germany. 2-0 Korea over Germany. Germany's out of the game. Serbia and Brazil. Brazil 2-0, 2-0. And then we have Switzerland and Costa Rica 2-2 tied there. That was on Wednesday. Let's go to the day, the 28th. And we have Japan and Poland. That's the early game at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. In a few hours, I guess. We're 9 o'clock now. Senegal and Colombia will be the next game at the same time, actually. And then we'll have England and Belgium at 2. And also we'll have Panama and Tunisia at 2 p.m. Now to the baseball scores. That's something we know. The Reds were in Atlanta. Reds, somewhere here. 6-5. The Royals were in Milwaukee. They didn't drink too much beer, so they 5-4 Royals. The Blue Jays were in Houston. The Astros 7-6, closer game. And in 11, the Mariners were in winless, hopeless Baltimore. 8-7. It's a close game. The Yankees were in Philadelphia. Phillies are 3-0. The Yankees got a shutout. The Angels and Red Sox in Fenway Park. Sox 9-6 in that game. The Athletics were in the Motor City and they shut out the Tigers 3-0. The Pirates were in New York. Pirates 5-3 over the Mets. The D-backs were in Florida. A 2-1 game there. Diamondbacks. The Padres and Rangers in Texas. Rangers 5-2. The Twins and White Sox on the south side of Chicago. It was White Sox 6-1. Cleveland and the Cardinals in St. Louis. It was Cleveland 5-1 interleague play. The Cubbies and Dodgers in Los Angeles. It was Dodgers 5-2. Mr. Wood was the winner. Mr. Jansen got the save. And in San Francisco, the Rockies were there, but the Giants 1-0 in that contest. And that does it for Major League Baseball. So we'll continue with the World Cup, the College World Series. And just looking at ESPN here, not anything going on here. Japan and Poland, well, the same old deal here. Senegal and Colombia. I guess we gave that last time. I know we gave England and Belgium and Panama and Tunisia are the afternoon games. Well, Senegal has to be interested in Colombia. Well, we're not going to be trying to handicap this anymore. We'll look in a future broadcast at the actual handicappers to see where we are. But nonetheless, the Unions, our episode on the 28th of June, 2018. We'll see you on Friday Jobber. And the open source report will get done. It's basically done now. We just need to do a little updating on it over this weekend shuttle. We'll have Numbers Man, our macroeconomics program. It will appear. It appears now consumer confidence is waning a little bit there, and some other numbers are kind of up and down. We are transitioning from the Barack Obama economy to the DJ Trump economy. We're not exactly there, and it's a little bit more complicated than it would normally be because of various machinations in the economy. For instance, the market is down, the market is up, although the precursor to the trade war is going on. Out of China, there was a news conference. We have it on some of our white paper also. On the WTO, China is going out all front. We'll have that on a Numbers Man also, and we'll dive into that white paper a little bit there. And, of course, we always have a Monday morning quarterback on the talk shows. And the week that was, we'll have some interesting things going on there. Somewhere there we'll bring the Newt in. Old Newt's talking about, quote-unquote, welfare reform. So they're preaching some of the old things. They're not sure how much the Congress will get when they finally get out of town to August recess. They used to recess all of August. But we'll see. They're trying to wrap up this confirmation before the November elections, because they don't really know at this point in time how the winds will blow.